Hello and welcome into the SorareData Game Week 407 preview. I am Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare. Today, trying something new, guys. We're going to use some SorareData tools to figure out how to win everything that we enter this week. Unfortunately, not everybody can win, so some of us will just have to be content with winning tier ones instead of tier zeros. But yeah, the point of all of this in this show, which I think will be a weekly show, I haven't decided yet if we're actually going to do bi-weekly, which in that sense, I meant twice a week instead of every other week. But we have a bunch of tools at SorareData that I think people are underutilizing. And so the point of today's show and the show from now on is to show you guys what we have. So this idea originally came up when I was looking at what we're going to see this upcoming weekend, which is the return of club football. Thank God, because it's I've had enough of the international break. As simple as that. So what I wanted to do when I was making my lineups was to see how competitive they were. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, we do have that lineup strength indicator in our lineup builder. I'll show that in a little bit. The point of this show is really not at all about my lineups and more about what I think are some important tools that people can use to figure out if they can make their lineups better, or maybe they can target certain competitions, or maybe grab certain player cards before this upcoming weekend. I think the plan may be to move the show to Thursday. I haven't fully decided yet. To be honest, my original idea was Tuesday as kind of a first look, but a lot of what we do in preparation for the game week revolves around pick scores. And the pick scores are the most helpful as close to the game week deadline as possible. I don't think a Friday show for what we're trying to do here is the kind of that deadline show. I know Quinny does one that is kind of the news leading up to it. That's not really what I'm trying to do. And so go watch that every Friday before the deadline, but hopefully this show at least gets us prepared for it. Thank you to everybody for joining live. And everybody is, I think, excited for club football to come back. So let's just jump right into it because there's no reason not to. I have no idea how long this show will be. Part of me thinks it could be 20 minutes. Another could be 6 hours. I can assure you it will not be 6 hours. So diving into SorareData, the first thing that I like to do, and I think is important for a lot of people, is to go to this matchups tab on our Game Week Center. And what this does, let me move over to 407, since that's the one we're talking about. What this does is it gives you kind of a good idea of which teams may be, or which teams are kind of the heaviest favorites for the game week. And then that we can use to kind of estimate which competitions may be more challenging to compete in than others. So it defaults to Global All-Star. I'm actually going to skip Global All-Star for now. We'll do that one last because I think it's important to go into the individual regions for now to give us a better idea. So looking at Champion Europe, it's interesting because I feel like we're naturally used to expecting Man City, PSG, Bayern all at the top. And this game week, we don't necessarily have that. They are obviously high favorites, but they're not as high as others. And so we can see here that RB Leipzig is the top favorite among Champion Europe teams. They're home against Augsburg. They have a 79% chance to win. And using our opponent scores here, we can see that Augsburg give up a decent amount of fantasy points to defenders and midfielders, at least more than the forwards and goalkeepers. And you can kind of make the assumption that the goalkeepers don't score particularly well against Augsburg because they don't have to make a lot of saves and they don't get a lot of sweepers. There's just not a lot of AA. And so if Augsburg happen to score, you're looking at like a 36-point score likely from your goalie. If they get a clean sheet, you're not much more than 60. And so just one of those things to look out for. We're kind of new in the season now. So we have a relatively small sample size in terms of fantasy points allowed to certain positions, just something to consider when looking at both the opponent scores and the matchup indicators. The matchup indicators are a combination of the opponent scores and the fantasy points scored by players from the specific team. And so like for these opponent scores with, this 19 for forwards, that's a combination of the Tottenham forwards and the Sheffield United points allowed to forwards. So, like I said, Leipzig is the biggest favorite and have decent clean sheet odds. I believe Roma actually have the highest clean sheet odds among champion Europe teams. Obviously, we don't have current Roma cards, but there are plenty of Roma cards out there. And then for the teams, Leipzig, 60% chance to score 3 goals. These are all from different bookmakers. These aren't SorareData projected, goals scored or goals conceded. These are just from the bookmakers. So we can see Leipzig, Tottenham, Bayern, Liverpool, Barcelona, PSG, teams that like to score goals. Understandably, they are going to be near the top of this list. And then Bayern is home against Bayer Leverkusen, so that's kind of a really big matchup in the Bundesliga, but also may not necessarily be a great matchup for Bayern Munich. And so if you have a Bayern Munich stack, maybe this isn't the weekend to put them in your biggest and best lineup, because if you do that in Champion Europe, you're going to be going up against players from Tottenham, Barcelona, Liverpool that have significantly easier matchups this week than we're kind of accustomed to. Soru was asking what bookmakers are the odds taken from, or is it an aggregate, and are they refreshed throughout the week? They used to be exclusively from Unibet. They are now an aggregate, and yes, they are updated throughout the week, just like pick scores get updated throughout the week. And that's because the odds change and projected lineup percentages change. And so, yes, all of that is very fluid throughout the week. And so that's part of the reason I was not really excited about doing the show on Tuesday, because there are situations where we won't even have odds for the weekend matches. And, on Tuesday, maybe they have a midweek match and a lot of bookmakers don't want to go too far ahead. And so we'd see that particularly with kind of the lower clubs or smaller clubs that play in like the Conference League, that they may not have weekend odds on Tuesday. Hopefully by Thursday we have them. Although even this time is a little early for that, because the Thursday matches wouldn't have all played by now. But so hopefully that answers the question. So yeah, you can just use this page to go through. And again, we do have kind of the weird situations where we don't have full data yet. Like if you notice from Sevilla's matchup, who do they play this week? Is that Carta? No. Las Palmas. So Las Palmas is a promoted side. And so we don't really have a long data set of how they do in La Liga to these positions. And so that's why we do, admittedly, early on in the season, we get some wonky numbers. And that's where I feel like it's important to rely on the bookmaker odds, because it still gives you a good idea. Like Sevilla looks like they have bad matchup ratings, but it's mostly just a lack of data. And so, there's still 59% chance to win, 47% to get a clean sheet. So there's nothing too bad with that. And then I'm not going to go through every team, but it's just something to pay attention to. If you have Juventus players are home against Lazio this week, probably not an ideal situation. Atletico Madrid away to Villarreal, Rennes at home to Lille. And so that's just something to look out for when you do have these players that you may think, well, it's actually, a decent matchup this week. But then when you look at the other matchups that are out there, maybe your Inter stack is not that competitive looks like they have a derby this weekend, or Manchester United at home against Brighton. It is at Old Trafford, but Brighton is pretty tough. And so, maybe we won't see kind of the explosive scores coming from at least Bruno Fernandes. And does anyone else score well for Man United? I don't think so. Anyway. Just something to check out for there with Champion Europe. Challenger Europe is really where all of this came from, because there are some really lopsided matchups from big teams, or for big teams on the platform. And I think you can make an argument that Challenger will be particularly difficult this game week. And so will All-Star, because of the teams that are on this page right now, at least most of them. because not all of them are fully minted. But Celtic are the biggest favorite, 84% chance to win, 65% chance to score 3+ goals. I mean, they are absolutely supposed to smash Dundee FC. And so, who is a promoted team. So again, we have these weird kind of matchup indicators that aren't really complete. And so when you scroll over and you're like, all right, they absolutely should kill them. So Celtic, a huge favorite. Zagreb is a huge favorite. PSV, Feyenoord, Sporting, Benfica, Porto. It's tough when you see Sporting, Benfica, and Porto all with big favorites. Galatasaray, Fenerbahce, Bruges. I mean, these are all teams that are at least 65% chance to win. We have AZ at home against Rotterdam, which isn't really a great match, or isn't a bad matchup. Donna Demispor. So Mike Basson has a good point. Celtics score 3 under Brendan Rodgers. Fair enough. But again, it's like, it's really unfortunate. Like, if for somebody who is like, I've been waiting for this Vitesse stack to be, they're home against Warwick. This is it. And then you realize that every other, like the dominant challenger teams, some of which like Sporting and Porto, are not minted anymore. And so maybe that's better actually, because there are not so many players with those matchups. But it becomes something where you're like, oh, all right, so like Zenit is away, CSKA Moscow, Antwerp, like decent matchups, but not nearly as good as the teams that are on top. And so the Juju says, I'm sick of seeing PSV stacks at the top. Yeah, there will be some this week because of their home game this week. And so that's the really big one that I wanted to point out, is that the challenger teams have some really big, the dominant teams have the matchups that you bought them for. Looking at America, nobody seems to be good. Let's see here. River Plate's a big favorite. LAFC is up there amongst the, I'll even point out also that the page will show you all of the players that you have from this team. And so there's just that to consider. Kevin Hurt said most of these challenger stacks will go in all-star though, especially with the long form competition. So I'll get into that because I agree with you, but I'll get into that. Mike Basson also brings up another good point, is that another thing to consider is that there are European fixtures next week. So Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. And so we could see a little rotation. Celtic play Feyenoord next week. And so that is absolutely something to consider. Although coming out of the international break, I guess there are some players who could have long trips home. Maybe they get slightly rested this week. Always something to consider. So in America, we have like River Plate would be one of the higher favorites of the game week. But again, if you're just comparing them to the America teams, LAFC at home against the Galaxy. So that's another, what do they call it? El Tráfico is this weekend. We've got Philadelphia Union at home against FC Cincinnati, which should be a decent match. America's against, is that Guadalajara? Yeah. Austin is at home against Portland, two teams that have been like woefully disappointing this year. But overall, the matchups, there aren't that many kind of big favorites in America. And so if you do have one of these good America teams, at least from an odds perspective, you don't necessarily have a ton of competition like you would if you had a Zagreb stack or a PSV stack in Challenger. You could also make kind of the assumption that people who see this are more likely to play these players in America. Like if you have a River Plate stack and you're like, they do have a really good matchup, but it's not as good as a lot of the challenger ones. And so it makes it a little more difficult to play them in All-Star because they're just not as competitive as they are against just other America teams. And for Asia, we've got Pohang as the biggest favorite amongst the teams that we have odds for. Looks like we're still missing some from the Asian Champions League. So, but that is something to consider, that we've got Yokohama Kawasaki and Ulsan, like those are usually decent favorites. And so maybe we'll see if we can get those odds updated. But among the kind of the domestic teams, Pohang has a really good matchup. Isn't Ulsan double game week? If anybody knows that, because it looks like we've got them here twice. That would just be a mess from a rotation perspective. Anyway, Jongbuk, big favorites. But again, none of these teams in their domestic leagues look like they're huge, they're big enough favorites to justify playing them in All-Star. And all right, yes, John Andrew said yes, Ulsan's a double game week. So you do have the safety there of those players. You get two cracks at them. So that's good, at least good to know coming into this. And again, I'll see if we can get these Asian Champions League. Looking for food. This said the second game won't be AA scored. Is that, let's see, is that actually true? Because if the Champions League, is the Champions League game first? Yeah, the Asian Champions League game is second. That should be AA scored. Asian Champions League shouldn't have the same issues as K-League. And so, and through the official channels, Zora said the Asian Champions League game will be AA scored. They should be. They're not K-League games. So we shouldn't have that situation. Chani, better late than never. So welcome aboard. So that's kind of what we see in Asia. Again, Seoul, not a great matchup. There are really no great matchups here. And so I feel like we're probably more likely to see the Asia players staying in Asia if you're trying to do it from a pure competitive standpoint. And again, we'll get into the competitive lineup thing in a little bit that we have from the lineup builder. So, and second division, cannot forget second division. We've got, Auxerre is now the biggest favorite among second division. Ragdan said the problem was, Seol Young-woo was that he played both games with South Korea. So this is kind of going back to the whole players who are returning from international duty. Just like there's a chance that players, coming from South America back to Europe, depends when they come back, maybe they don't start on the weekend. And so those are always things you got to consider that when you do build these lineups. Ben Johnson said, I have a Pohang stack in Asia with an 85 score. It's actually an 88 because I didn't have a captain. So Ben, what happens when you play that lineup in All-Star? What's the score when you do that? Because that's, I think, things that people have to look out for. So anyway, second division, only two teams are 60% favorites that we have. Espanyol is the other in La Liga Smartbank. Hertha Berlin, Paderborn, Hamburg are up there. St. Pauli, Hanover. It's a lot of two Bundesliga clubs. Do we have odds for everyone? We do. So it looks, so Juju's kind of an interesting one. He said, be careful with Hertha because they have 3 out of 15 points. But they're playing, aren't these guys Braunschweiger? Eintracht? Aren't they Eintracht Braunschweig? That's how I would say it. Are they newly promoted? I don't even know. But Hertha Berlin, we've got basically currently, near bottom of the table of both teams. So I wouldn't necessarily, that's where I rely more on the sportsbook odds than my own knowledge because I don't have any. So again, I feel like if you looked at this and if you have players from the second division that normally kind of smash and you're like, all right, there's somebody I want to play, maybe an All-Star, just know that there are big teams from favorites. There are big teams that are big favorites. Like Celtic is the biggest favorite amongst the teams that we have odds for All-Star. And again, going back to that challenger thing, just going down the list, this is an All-Star. Yeah, so Ben was saying his 88 score in Asia is a 76 in All-Star. And that's because there are a lot of, obviously, when you're competing in All-Star, it's against people who are building lineups with players from Celtic, Zagreb, Leipzig, PSV, Feyenoord, River Plate, Sporting. And when you have that situation, I mean, you can decide, you're like, hey, if Pohang's going to just destroy, I'll play them in All-Star. But you're going in knowing that the competition the competition is much harder. Simple as that. And fundamentally, we know that because obviously in All-Star, players from all over are eligible. But this makes you realize that there are dominant teams in Challenger Europe or Champion that people can play in All-Star, particularly for these month-long competitions. And they have the matchups that you wanted them for. Like when you bought your Feyenoord stack, home against Heerenveen was one of the matches. Is that who that is? It was one of those matches that you were like, I'm going to eat this week. And so it's just something to consider when you're looking at something like that. People who bought Tottenham stacks see home against Sheffield United and they're like, this is why I have it. And speaking of Tottenham, David Alves was just saying that the number one min of the new Sun Hyung Min was 0.158 ETH, which was 5x the floor. I don't know if that's that much or not, actually. I don't know. That's not what we're here for. So that's how I literally start all of my research, is looking at the matchups and seeing which teams have the best one. For those of you who like to trade in and out of cards every week, I find this page so helpful because it really gives you an idea of who has good matchups coming up. You can go further in the future to see some of the odds if we have them, or the matchup indicators. Obviously, those will change as games happen. But the other one that I really use is the pick scores. And so as a reminder, pick scores are for all SorareData members. If you have a membership, you will have access to the pick scores. And pick scores are always player and competition dependent. And so a player may be AAA in Champion Asia, but AA or A in All-Star Limited. And so, or in All-Star, excuse me. So I actually want to point that out. One of the examples that we had from Pohang before, and I happen to have an Alexander Grant center back from Pohang. And so let me actually start with the Asia one. So if you look up Asia, the idea is these are the best players in Asia. So Grant is a AA because of his matchup. And again, you can hover over the pick score and you can see exactly why. I guess his form is not great. And the projected lineup percent, or, part of the graph will probably increase as we get closer to the deadline. As you can see here, only 12 people have projected. We don't have enough reliable projectors to say that we think he will definitely start. And so he's a AA in Champion Asia Limited. And if you go to All-Star Limited, this is where he ends up being AA anyway. And my whole point is destroyed, but let's see what we got here. Ben Johnson says Cap 240 pick scores are so useful. So I'll get into Cap 240 because the pick scores for 240 are a little different than, well, not a little different. They are different. They're calculated differently than the pick scores for the other competitions. So again, this defaults to All-Star Limited. Luke de Jong is the number one ranked pick score player for forward for the game week with their matchup. Who's that? NEC, yeah. And if there's ever a spider graph that you want, it's great. Ben Johnson said Alex Rand is a AA and All-Star, which just ruins my entire point that he would be different. But I guess he's just the GOAT. Oh, well. But anyway, I guess I probably should have looked at it ahead of time. So there are a few things that I like to do with this page. And again, you can change it to any competition you want. I made sort of a big point about how Challenger is going to be really competitive this week. So you can go to Challenger and see who all of the best players are. And you can see it's led by a bunch of forwards from the teams that we recognized before. PSV, Porto, Benfica. I have no idea who this guy is, but he looks like Christian Rabic. Oh, he's pretty good. And who do they have this week? Newly promoted RWDM for the other Bruges. So what I like to do, and it depends on what level you play, it becomes a little easier to do this for rare and limited, just because floor prices and latest valuations, due to the liquidity of their cards, tend to be a little more accurate. But if you do need a card, we have the floor price and the latest valuation of those players right on this page. And so, you scroll through and see exactly who the AAA players are. And it's going to be a bunch of players we know, like Dusan Tadic is a AAA here. Who do they have? Antalyaspor. That's who Fenerbahce plays this week. And so you can go through. Sugawara is a AAA. And you can just see all these AAAs. Looks like Joseph Misic is the first non-AAA. He's a AA, closely followed by Robert Lubicic, his teammate. And so Ben pointed this out, that he said, my favorite thing to do is go on Cap 240 pick score, sort by price ascending, and look for the cheapest projected starters and rare, which is definitely something you can do. He said you can get starters to plug a gap for insanely cheap. So as you see on the pick scores for all of these players, and again, this is just Challenger, Europe, rare. We've got scoring history, matchup, odds, projected lineup, meaning if they're projected to start, and form. If you go to Cap 240, I'll just do limited here, you will get the same data points, as well as how much we think, meaning SorareData, think that the player will outscore their L15 cost. And I have heard some feedback from people who think that it's not, kind of overstates it. So the cost efficiency is how we put it in this graph. But we've got a number of players who have low L15 scores and therefore low costs when it comes to cap mode. And if we think that they will outscore their cost, they're going to get a higher pick score. And just what Ben was saying, what you can do here is just look at the floor prices. And if you needed a player, I have no idea who this player is. Looks like he plays in Austria, but he's our top pick scorer. I'm guessing he's barely played. Let's see here. So he's got 39, 71, 24, 44 with a cost of 40 based off of his matchup, which is against an away match against a promoted team in Austria. We think he will outscore his cost of 40 very well. And therefore his pick score is really high for Cap 240. His pick score will not be high like an All-Star. Let's go over and see what it is. So All-Star, the page also defaults just to show forwards. So pick scores, if you just have forwards, will actually be different than if you select everyone. So that's another thing I should point out. When you have just forwards, the pick score is comparing this player, Luke de Jong, let's say, to all other forwards and giving a pick score grade based off of that. If you select the other positions, it's now comparing his viability to all other positions. Obviously, you can see it's still really good. And so that's fine. So who is this? Still a AAA and All-Star for $1.29. So if you really love pick scores, you got a $1.29 limited card with your name on it. But anyway, so that's really what how the pick scores work fundamentally for the cap modes. Ben Johnson said, could you ask for a filter for the community projections on this page so that I could filter only projected starters? So it's a good question. The pick scores, as the week goes on, the pick scores become more and more valuable. And so what you see on Tuesday will likely be different than what you see on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday leading up into the deadline. Generally, players that are not either 100% to start or 99% to start won't have good pick scores. It's really difficult later in the week to see a player who was like definitely going to not start have a high pick score. And it's because of the community projections. I'll actually go into something because I was part of a conversation yesterday about this, that some people don't feel like the community projection is overly helpful because there are times where they see a player who they think obviously will not start and is projected to start. If that's the case, you can go in and just add in, like submit a projection that they will not start, and that will start helping people do this. And so, it'll help people see that they may not start. Carol's saying the starter filter is viewable on mobile app, but not on desktop. So that is another thing. If you go onto your mobile app, there is a pick score option in the Game Week Center. And so anything that you do on this page for pick score wise, you'll be able to see on the SorareData mobile app on iOS or Android. And so, hold on, let me make myself a little bigger here. So this is just the regular Game Week Center. And then you can see right there is pick scores. And then that will pull up all of the pick scores for the upcoming game week. And again, it'll default to All-Star Limited, but you can see exactly what Luke de Jong, Vincent Janssen, Yuki Owashi. Anyway, so you can see all of that. And then, there's a lineup projections in there. And so you can just basically make it so that it just picks starters. But again, if you're just looking at the main players, like the highest rated players, it's going to do starters. Like that's what it'll do. So I'm not going to go through all of the good players for the game week, but I will also say that we have them for the amateur leagues as well, like pick scores for all of these. And so you can use that as part of your weekly research to do stuff like this. So the last thing I'm going to point out is in the lineup builder, because we added a few things. And this is where I realize not everybody's gallery is the same. And so, well, obviously not everybody's gallery is the same, but I do want to at least point out what it can show you in terms of the upcoming game week. So in addition to, let me just clear all these out because it'll just make it easier for everyone. As you can see, I was playing around with this before because I have saved lineups. But what I did going into this game week is I tried to use the lineup strength indicator to determine where I was going to put my best cards this week. One thing that is worth checking out is there are the two things. We have the prize pool for every competition. So whatever you choose in here, the prize pool for the upcoming game week will show here, and it'll show kind of the average points required over the past, I think it was 8 game weeks. I think it's 8 game weeks of what the minimum points required for specific tiers were. And that's, it'll be 8 weekends or 8 midweeks, whatever we are coming up. So this is the last 8 weekends, which get a little wonky with international stuff, just like everything, but at least it'll give us an average to see what where we think we will end up. So additionally, we have this historical tab, and this will show you the minimum points required, the actual points that were required in each game week. And so once you start building, and I'll show that in a second, it'll actually show the players that you picked in your lineup and how that lineup would have done in previous game weeks. Now, there are probably reasons that the lineup that you built this week wasn't really playable in previous game weeks, but it gives you kind of a better idea. Chani, what do we got here? Does the SorareData lineup builder automatically suggest the lineup with highest strength, or is there an odd time it could suggest the one with lower strength based on some other data? So it will suggest the highest pick score, which theoretically should be the highest strength. Like it should be the same thing. So each pick score, Clement's probably going to be furious that I share this. Each pick score has a numerical value to it. And so actually, when you use the pick scores, That's how these guys are ordered. Like Luke de Jong, Ruben Diaz, Harry Wilson, Vincent Janssen all have AAA pick scores, but de Jong's is higher. Like the underlying numerical value is higher than Ruben Diaz's. And these aren't specific fantasy point projections. It's like it's a score. It's a score of how well we think that they will do, which is different than like projected fantasy points. I know everybody always talks about they want projected fantasy points. And with a game like Sorare, with how many scoring intricacies there are, it's just very difficult to do that in an effective manner. And so we feel like the pick scores are the best way to do it right now. And so what the lineup builder will do when you suggest a lineup is it will give you basically like the highest pick score, numerical pick score goalie. So you see here, I have Fernando Muslera and Guzman from Tigres. Both are AA, but Muslera is higher. So Rude said, can we get the overall lineup scores on each of our teams under save lineups so we can have a glance? If this was Twitter, I think Clement would send you like the eyes emojis. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Anyway, so when you suggest a lineup, and you don't necessarily need to do a suggested lineup in order to get this lineup strength indicator. Like if you just do it yourself, it will provide that too. And so each time you add a player, it will obviously increase your strength score because you have a better player who is going into it. So I'm specifically not doing the highest pick scores guys just to show you what happens when you go through all of this. So Ragdan said, why instead of triple letter rating, we don't get the numerical score? Wouldn't it be more precise? So it's mostly because we think that the numerical score will be taken as a projection, and that's not what it is. And it's like a strength rating. And yeah, we just don't think it'll be misunderstood more than understood. And we feel like the pick score rating system letter rating system is easier. So here you have your lineup strength indicator. You can see it all here. And like I said, the suggested lineup one, unless you come up with the same lineup, the suggested lineup one will always have a higher lineup strength because it's simply making what it considers the best lineup for you. So it's going to do your highest rated goalie, your highest rated defender, your highest rated midfielder, your highest rated forward, and then your highest rated card after that. It's as simple as that. So what I did yesterday is I went through the lineup builder and basically did like the suggested lineup for every competition. So if I think All-Star Rare is where I should prioritize the most, like this is the score, the lineup that I want to be the strongest. Suggest a lineup. It was 84. I then went out of that. I didn't save it because I wanted to see what the highest one to start was. I then went to All-Star Rare Pro, and I realized that this is a bit cumbersome now. We are working on something that will do this, I think, in one click, but we're not there. So I have an 85 now for All-Star Rare Pro, which actually is different than yesterday. So I'm happy about that. But I basically went through all of them, and this is how it broke down. This is for me, for like my gallery. And so the idea is the Champion America Rare Pro lineup that I can put out. And I'll even just show you guys what that lineup is. And again, because it's based on pick scores, the lineup that it suggests on Tuesday is most likely to be different on Friday. No, not most likely. Could be different. So if I do a suggested lineup, I have 88. All right, so it is the same. And so from a lineup strength perspective, if I want to prioritize and put my best cards in the competition that my cards are the most competitive for, I should start with Champion America Rare Pro and work my way down from there. Now, that doesn't mean that so if I save this Champion America Rare Pro lineup, right? This is an 88, which what do we say is a very strong lineup. And the issue now is my All-Star Rare Pro lineups now cannot have any of these players. And I say that because when I did do my All-Star Rare Pro lineup, it included some of these guys. I know, Andy. VL Pandas are crazy, right? Just crazy. So this is an 85 score, but it has Julian Quinones from America. And if I really did prioritize Champion America Rare Pro, because according to the pick scores, that's my most competitive lineup, Quinones obviously cannot be in this lineup. And so I'll do exactly what I did last night and show you guys how I ended up saving it. So what you can do is, I mean, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. So if I have this Champion America Rare Pro lineup, strength indicator of 88, I save this lineup, and then really what I should do, and hopefully what SorareData will just do for me in the future, is run all of them again and figure out what's my next strongest one. So really what I should do, I'm not going to do that here, don't worry, is I should go to All-Star Rare, do a suggested lineup, see what the score is, delete that out, go to Rare Pro, do the same thing, and do all of the competitions that these cards could be eligible for, and to see what the best path is. So theoretically, the highest cumulative strength indicator score would be the lineups that would make me the most competitive in as many competitions as possible. So we go back to, let me do Rare Pro. So we know that I cannot have any of the cards from that America Rare Pro lineup. So if I have All-Star Rare Pro, now it includes this Tadic card instead of Quinones. And it's an 82. It was an 85. This is from yesterday. It was an 85 from if Quinones was starting. Pablo was saying somebody needs another Quinones super rare. I would love another one for sure. And Mike Basson this is exactly right. Now we revisit the old question of, would you rather 185 plus team and 365s or 475 plus lineups? And so, yeah, that's what you need to consider. So anyway, so how you build from here, like I think this lineup indicator will actually change the way that we all make lineups for the better. But when you have rares and super rares, this is always the question. Like, are you better off playing this 82 in All-Star Rare Pro that has these two super rares, or maybe All-Star Super Rare? And you see where those cards go. Now I have a 70. Now again, Quinones is probably it's obviously one of my best super rares because it's in the lineup that the algorithm thought was the best. But, and I did this yesterday, if I started with All-Star Super Rare, I still only get a 73. So I actually don't have that competitive of a lineup in All-Star Super Rare. But I do have a slightly better lineup in Cap 270 Super Rare. And that doesn't mean it's the same lineup in 270 as it was in All-Star, but I know that that's kind of where they are. And nothing makes you feel better about the quality of your cards than when something like 220 is high up on the list. And so there's that. Kevin Hurt said, I'd still like to see the button would also see how SD prioritizes. So you can see right now how SorareData prioritizes your lineups and competitions just by this suggested lineup and the indicator, because the suggested lineup will always provide you with the highest lineup strength options. Like it's going to pick the highest pick scores for each possible position. And so whatever the highest lineup strength is when you just do all of your lineups like I did yesterday, the most competitive lineup I can build this game week, according to the pick scores, is Champion America Rare Pro. I don't want to do that. And so I know going into the game week that my best possibility at a good lineup, I am saying no thank you to. So anything beyond this, it's on me. And I can use the suggested lineup for everything else. But I have to know that going into it based on the pick scores, my best options are in America. And remember back when we were talking about the matchups and everything? I have River Plate players, and they are heavy favorites this week, even though I don't think River Plate was even included in the... Did I save the America Rare Pro? Yeah, of course. 0 River Plate. Stefan said, is it too hard to let us make the priority list after we submit the list? SorareData would give us the list with strength indicator. I mean, you can do that right now. Like the way that it's built, you can determine what the priorities are, and it will let you, like if I think All-Star Rare Pro, like that's what I want to prioritize. I can just come here to All-Star Rare Pro, get the suggested lineup. I can go back and see how well it would have performed. Turns out not very well. Looks like I just missed a reward. So also if you click here, if you click on the week, it'll show you exactly where they scored. So this lineup, now granted, I wouldn't necessarily have played this lineup, although it's a decent lineup. I would have scored 376 and come up short of a reward because 404 was the minimum for a tier 3 that week. And European season hasn't gone long enough, so we probably don't even have that. Yeah, so we don't have enough data. So if I think this is the lineup that I want to start with, this is my priority right here. All-Star Rare Pro, I have a strength indicator of 84, which is still pretty good. I can save this lineup. And if I say, okay, Challenger, like I have, let's see, 2 Challenger players here. So let's say I want Challenger Rare Pro to be my next priority. Like that's where I want to focus. Now, again, I'm doing that knowing that there are huge favorites amongst the Challenger teams. And I basically have to hope that everyone's going to play them in All-Star because they want to do that, the month-long competition. So I do Challenger Rare Pro. I get this lineup here. I can save it. And then I can just go down my own priority list and figure out what I want to do. Let's see. Sorry, I'm going to catch up on the chat here. Ragdan said, too complex to implement, but if the EV of pools and a chance at it could be calculated, there could be score telling which lineup has more real direct EV. So I think obviously the goal is for us to give you a strength indicator and say you have a 87 strength score, which puts you in a good position to win a tier 3 in Challenger Europe Rare Pro, right? Like that's what we want. And you may have seen Vitaly posting some charts recently. We're seeing if there is a possibility that exists, meaning is what we're doing indicative of what could happen, or are the strength indicators accurate enough from previous lineups that if we do have every single lineup that we said was a 91 a reward, great. Now we know that if you get a 90, you're in based on what has happened previously, you're in a very good position to win a card. It doesn't always happen. Guys get hurt. Some guys just, there was a player that we talked about on limited time only a few weeks or last week or the week before, Effican Karaka here. So he was one of the highest pick score players of the game week. And if you look back and you're thinking, oh, he scored 41. He was a AAA, pretty sure it was a AAA. He wasn't that good. Well, the guy missed a penalty. So from a pick score point of view, the pick score is telling you he's in a really good position to do well. And if a player is standing over the ball to take a penalty, that's a really good position that you want your player in. Sometimes they miss, like it happens. But that doesn't mean the pick score was wrong. I think you can make the argument the pick score was right because all it said was this player is in a good position to do well, and they had an opportunity to do well. And he just let us down. It happens. Let's see. Ragdan said, and the dream would be to get the total EV of all lineups combined with different possibilities. Yep, I think that you're right. Yeah. Kevin Hurd said, yeah, but you would have had to jump between competitions to gauge that. The button would do that all instantly. Then you can choose if you're going with it or not. Yeah. The amount of computing power it takes for every, to run all of the possibilities of if I start here, or you do the priority list, or you let SorareData figure out the priority list based on the pick scores. Yeah, it's just a lot. And we're working on it. Like that's what we want to do. But the goal here is to give every member who uses the lineup builder the tools to make the most competitive lineups and enter them in the competitions that get them the most return. Simple as that. Like the reason we exist is to make the people who use the site more successful. That's our goal. Anyway, Mike Basson said, I feel like we've reversed engineered from rabbit hunting. It does feel like that. You're right. You're right. Does the strength score, PM, does the strength score take into consideration the probability to reach the threshold for the cap 240 or not at all? I don't believe it does. I think it actually, not right now at least. I think it simply gives you the pick scores and the lineup indicator, is the strength indicator, is how much they will outscore their L15s. Like that's a big part of it. And so if you build a lineup and they have like a combined L15 of 150, it probably scores really well. If like the pick score as well, if we think it scores 220, because that's 70 points over the L15, which is a lot. But obviously that doesn't get you to the threshold. I think the goal, which is what everybody would want to see, is your lineup strength is 85. Previously, every lineup that had a strength indicator of 85, among lineups that have had a strength indicator at this level, 90% reach the threshold, right? Like that's what we want to know. We want to know, is not something we want to know. We can know, but it's something we want to at least get an indication of how likely am I to win a reward with this lineup. And that's much easier said than done, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We're obviously trying to do it. And speaking of just randomly hitting buttons, hit the like button on this video, please. Thanks, Mike. Let's see. Stefan says, give us 2 buttons, red and blue. One button is the AI and the second is our priorities. Yeah. So one of the, and Hamidism said crypto payment for membership. This is not available yet. No. So one of the things that a lot of people were, like some of the feedback we got on the battling the SorareData lineup builder, that the videos from Phil's and Nellis and Chani, that like, oh, it'd be fun to do that. Like any member of SorareData can do this. Like fundamentally, if you have a SorareData membership, all of this, what I showed you, is available to you. And so you can go in and say, you can even go in and, as I mentioned, it's a little tedious to go through each one of doing this list and saying, okay, Champion America Rare Pro is the best, and then doing it all over again to see which one has the highest strength indicator based on the cards that are left. But you could do it. Frankly, let's be honest, we all had plenty of time. We all think we're busy, but we spend 12 hours on SorareData every day. Just make it a different, Do this for your 12 hours instead. I'm just kidding. I know it's like probably no more than 8. But you can do this. You can build your lineups or have the algorithm do it for you, and you can compare at the end of the week how they all did. And yeah, so just check that out. Mike Basson said this is available Monday free. Yes, for how long? So pick scores are all for members, and so the suggested lineup with the strength indicator, or the lineup strength is based on the pick scores, and so that's for members, for SorareData members. Like star members. Sorry. I keep saying members, but star members. I feel like we didn't actually go through the game week that much, but this is basically what the goal is each week, is to show where we think the matchups are. I guess we can go back to that, but Matthew said to compare with SD, it could be great to register a draft with the lineup suggestion, but then in the Sorare results, select the draft you want to see the results. I think we are working on something to allow you to see results of your drafts, which is kind of what everybody wants to see, right? So just going back to the matchups again, I think, it all depends on where people are in the where they stand right now in All-Star. I would assume that a lot of people are putting their best lineups in All-Star because of the month-long competitions. Maybe that gives you an opportunity to play your PSV stack in Challenger. Maybe some people have double PSV stacks and they can play them in both. But overall, because of the way that Challenger is this week, I think we could see some really high scores. We could also see them in U23 because some of these teams have some very good U23 players as well. And so it does feel like based on these matchups, there's going to be outcry about how hard it is to win rewards, and that scores are crazy to win, or scores needed to win are crazy. And you can sit there and say, I knew this was going to be a problem this week because you watched this show. Final comment. So rude. When will we get a button to submit SorareData drafted lineups straight into Sorare? That is more on Sorare than it is SorareData. So there's that. And then watch out for people like Kev, who have a Celtic stack in All-Star and then a Zagreb half stack in Challenger. It's going to be that. So thank you to everybody for joining. Again, if you could please like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Shout out to Quinny. If you think that this is a helpful show, the plan is to do this every week, either on Wednesday or Thursday. I haven't decided yet about a preview for the midweek, but I'm open. Like I would like to do it. Just got to find the right time, especially with Champions League coming. I'll be honest that the matchup page might get a little wonky because we have teams that, haven't played that much in those competitions, but maybe we'll just dive in together and see what they look like on, Monday, or I guess it would be Monday. I don't know. We'll see. But if you guys have any suggestions of anything else you want to see on this show, feel free to leave a comment below. You can also find me on Twitter at Andrew M. Laird. Happy to take any feedback there. And let's go get it this week.